Okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Richman, author of The Culture Blueprint and the new Culture OS Culture Operating System. And we're going to be talking about the opt-in framework, but I want to give you guys like the whole context of this because it's one of those things where I can give you the big reveal, but when you see it in the whole context, it's way more inspiring that way. Cool. So I do a lot of work in culture, and what I'm most fascinated with is how to simplify it. I look at this book I just got here. It's huge, thick OD, organizational development, goes into all these complex models. I don't like that. I like simple things that really work. And I was actually in the organizational development school at Georgetown, and they had us do this exercise that I think really clearly defines what we're going to talk about. Is they talked about what happens when you have a breakdown in trust. And I want you guys to do this in your mind. You don't have to share with me, but bring up a time where you were disappointed, where you were let down, where you lost trust. Okay, bring that up in your mind. And it's going to be one of these things. Somebody said they were going to do something and they didn't do it. Or somebody said they would not do a certain thing and they actually did it. Or they didn't necessarily say it, but you expected them. You expected, maybe you got a general courtesy or whatever it was for them to do something, they didn't do it, right? So what's happening here is a breakdown in agreements. And I realized that that's everything in culture. Is when you take a job offer, that's an agreement. Even a simple commerce exchange. I'm going to give Jasmine this money. She agrees to give me this deliverable, right? So all of business is really running on this currency of agreements. And I found that the organizations that make those really, really clear, like, so for example, at Zappos, it wasn't just, hey, you should live by the core values. The agreement was so clear that we literally swore an oath and signed a contract that said that we would uphold the values 24/7, because that's explicit agreement. And unfortunately, what's happening in our world now is the exact opposite. Have you ever clicked that button that says, I have read the terms of service and agree to them? It's turned us into liars. That is not clear agreement there. So what I'm talking about here is the opposite, is how can we be so clear on agreements? And this is going to be a structure for how to do this. So I'm going to share with you my screen here. Oh, Jasmine, you mind letting me do that? So I can explain to you where this came from, the model, and I think it will change your life when you really understand it and start to use it, and will lead to you not being disappointed again, and not disappointing others again when you understand how this works. So, okay. Can you see my screen there? Yeah, great. So opt-in culture. First, I want to really give this shout out to my mentor, Dan Mezek. He really helped me understand a lot of these concepts about the power of agreement. And one of the things he shared with me is, I don't know if you've heard of Scrum. It's this agile form of development that everybody loves. And the most interesting thing I found about this book on the reviews is one of the most popular reviews on it on Amazon, which says, this was a great book, but I didn't like it since I know Scrum, but find it hard to work really well, and was hoping to get more info on how to make it work well. And what they kind of leave out in this is that that they don't talk about a core fundamental value within Agile, which is it can't be forced. It has to be done in a way where people really accept it. And so that I'll do one last metaphor before we really get into, or two metaphors before we get into the model here, which is this. This is a restaurant with empty tables. And why is this important? Because a study was done where they found that people weren't showing up for reservations, essentially not meeting their agreement. But what they found, just like when we click on the terms of service and it's not really understanding it, people weren't actually agreeing. What does that mean? Well, Jasmine calls up and to ask us a reservation. I say, hey, okay, Jasmine, we've got you down for table of 2 at 7:30. Call us if anything changes. And she says, great. Now, did she agree to call? Not really. She just kind of said, great. Right. And so oftentimes they wouldn't call back. But then what they did is change the language, because all of culture exists in language and how we communicate. And they changed the language simply to, hey, Jasmine, we've got you down for a table of 2 at 7:30. would you please call us if anything changes and then wait for an answer? And she says, yes. And they found in this study when they did it, the return call rate went up by 80%. Why? Because there was a clear invitation, opt-in, and agreement. And now it's in alignment with ourselves versus when somebody tells us to do something. When I say, Jasmine, call us if anything changes, that's a command. I didn't invite, I didn't ask, there was no opt-in. And so she's in the back of her mind, consciously or unconsciously, is saying, I never agreed to that. So that's really getting into the power of clear agreement. And what I realized from my mentor is that everything is really optional, because at the end of the day, we can't force anybody to do anything. And I actually experimented with this at Zappos, this idea of an optional meeting. And now I recommend companies do this all the time, where I say, if they're, and they don't have to be there to get their work done, why should they be there? And I threw this meeting and I said, if anybody wants to come, please come. You don't have to. I know you have a lot of work to do, but if you're interested in this topic that I'm exploring, please come. Some of the people I thought should be there weren't there. Some of the people that I didn't expect to have any interest did show up. And we had a meeting with a consultant there. It was 5 hours of the best meeting we ever had. All this laughing joy. The guy said, wow, this is the best team I've ever worked with, the consultant. I said, this isn't a team. I just asked who wants to be here. That's the power of opt-in, when people actually opt in out of their own conscious will rather than forced to do something. Is this making sense? Cool. So the flip side of opt-in is if you imagine that everything is optional, the power that we have all comes down to invitation crafting. How do you make a powerful invitation such that people want to opt in, not get them to opt in? People will say to me, how do I get people to opt in? No, getting people to opt in is manipulation, but creating a well-crafted invitation. The best example my mentor gave me was this. Like, imagine I invite you to a dinner party. You don't know me that well. And I say, hey, we're having a dinner party at 7 on Wednesday. You want to come? And Jasmine might think, oh, I don't know who Robbie's friends are. What are they going to serve for dinner? This could be weird. What if I want to leave early? And she might say, maybe, or maybe even no, right? That's very different if I say, hey, Jasmine, I'm having a dinner party on Wednesday. We're going to serve this gluten-free Italian. It's really excited about this. Let me tell you about a few of the people who are going to come. Let me tell you about Courtney, about Josephine, and why I think you'd really like them. And that's just 2 of the 10 who are coming. We're going to start at 7. We're going to serve dinner by 8. We're going to wrap it up at 9, and people can feel free to stay for dessert or go at that point. If that sounds good, just let me know by Friday, right? That's a well-crafted invitation. So let's get into this of what this means in terms of the opt-in framework. Well, first, with any task that often gets left out is why. Why am I asking somebody to do this? Well, that's really important. And then these 4 other factors before I get into this framework that we're going to use. And this is things that I've been using with some of the most successful organizations out there. And it's going to sound really simple, but you'd be surprised how often we just leave it out. Like all those details I shared with you about a dinner invitation. Oftentimes we don't think about sharing all those details. So these are the 4 things when we're doing any kind of opt-in task in a work context that I think are really important. One is definition of done. How will we know that this is done? Oftentimes people are assigning projects and it's not clear. Does that mean it's a 14-page PDF? Does that mean how will we exactly know that it's done and define it? Because a lot of projects just get vaguely defined. The second is standard of success. How will I know I did this well? I learned the hard lesson on this when I created this PowerPoint deck for my boss and spent so much time on it and all this detail. And he said, I didn't want this. I wanted a simple deck. Not only did you overkill on this, but you did the wrong concepts. So I spent tons of time because I didn't understand the standard of success that he had for me. And he didn't tell me. Next is the measures that matter. Is there something we're measuring? Is it, and that can be, if you're giving like a sales task to somebody, please make 20 calls. You either did 20 or you didn't. Maybe it's a success metric of how many people opt into something. We're looking to measure how many people clicked on this email. I want to get this to 20%. What is it, the measure that matters? That can directly connect to standard of success, That can be a result like sales, or that can be an actual input like calls. We don't have control over people if they buy something, but we have control over a measure like how many calls we do. So what are the measures that matter in this task? And then FOF, frequency of feedback. So if Jasmine gives me a task, there's a very different level between just get it done and send it to the client versus show me each of the prototypes versus just show me it when it's done right before the client. Those are very, very different levels of feedback. And it's up to the person delegating it, or if you're getting that task, to ask for it. Hey, how much feedback do you want? Can I just get this done and send it to them? Do you want every little design detail paid attention to? How much feedback do you want through this? Is this making sense? Any questions so far? Cool. So this is a lot of wind up to the opt-in framework, which we'll get into piece by piece, but we were covering that first part of the invite. The invite is crafting that invitation with all of these factors in mind. And if you're receiving the task, then you might want to ask for it if they didn't directly give it to you. And then there's a decision to make. And in a great culture, there's freedom to be honest as to what those answers are, of if it's yes, no, or maybe. And if you give somebody a task and they hesitate, they say, yeah, that's more like a maybe or a no. Right. And in some cultures, it's not safe to do that. But I believe in full accountability and responsibility. So if I give somebody a task and I sense hesitation, I'm going to ask about that. So let's get into how this goes. You craft that invitation with all those factors. You give somebody a decision to make, whether they're going to clearly opt in like they did with the restaurant example. And if it's yes, then ideally, we send the agreement in the form of writing. Because as a leader of a group of 25, I can't tell you the number of times it happened where I would say something and I'm clear as day where I was, the moment, et cetera. And they say, you never said that. And I'm like, oh my God. So the agreement is ideally, even when it's simple, just send a wrap up. Hey, Courtney, thanks for this, ... And for Courtney to reply back, confirmed, got it. Copy that, Roger that, right? When I worked with an organization one time, the guy was saying he was frustrated with the task. And I said, give me the language, because all culture exists in language. And I said, tell me the exact words you used. And he said, I said, can you get me this in 2 weeks? Okay. So what was the answer? That should work. It was like, that's not technically agreement. That should work doesn't mean they agree to. Agreeing to has to be really clear. And there are actually people within the software world who've taken this one step further of shifting the language. Because imagine if I say, Josephine, will you get this to me in 2 weeks? And you say yes, but if you really want to amp that up, I'd say, Josephine, do you promise you'll get me that in 2 weeks? Ooh. Oh, okay. Well, now maybe we'll get into the second part of hesitation. If I say promise, Josephine might be like, oh, I don't know about that. And I'll say, okay, that's okay. Why? And she might say, well, I don't know if Courtney's going to get me the text in time. And if she doesn't get me the text in time, I don't think I can get you that in 2 weeks. Okay, got it. Let's adjust the agreement here then. Can we say 2 weeks from when you get the text from Courtney? Yeah. Oh yeah, I got that. So what we're doing with the maybes is we're looking to figure that out. Is there a qualifier? Is there something we need to negotiate? Is she like, nope, I don't think 2. I'm like, well, 3. And maybe it's a negotiation, because in the strongest cultures we can be honest, and really, because in the bad cultures what they do is they'll say yes and then not deliver it on time. That's a broken agreement. Again, broken trust. And agreements are the currency of culture. So if there's a maybe or a hesitation that we sense, then we're looking to clarify more details, add qualifiers, negotiate. Sometimes it's adjusting the priorities. Josephine might say to Jasmine, well, I'm just worried that I won't be able to get that marketing email out on time if you want this from me in 2 weeks. And she might say, you know what, this is more important. Just delay the marketing email. Okay, got it. Great. And now we adjusted the priorities to make that agreement happen. Is this making sense? Cool. So, and then the last part of this is if it's a no, what happens if somebody says no? Well, we can accept that. You're like, okay, I guess that this is going to happen. Or it's usually an issue of reprioritizing, because I mean, think about, why would it be a no? It could be a no because Jasmine gave me a task that's literally outside my job description. I say, Jasmine, when I accepted this role here, I never agreed to do this. So I feel this is outside of my agreement. And in that case, I do feel like I am entitled to say no, because that wasn't our agreement. And she might have to go back to the table of the invitation, maybe even explore it with me and see what might be in it for me. Because again, we're adjusting an initial agreement that we had. Does that make sense? So that's a reason why somebody might say no, like not in my job description. And it might be important on that front end agreement to take that into consideration, to say this is the role will grow and expand. That's, if I know I'm opting into that this role is going to change, then it's not going to be a shocker if Jasmine gives me that. But if she gives me an exact role and I say, I am here to do this, I'm here to do marketing, to this, and that, this is not my role to go get you coffee or whatever the thing is. But usually it's an issue of reprioritizing, that Courtney's deck is just totally stacked and just doesn't feel like she can get all those things done. We ask a lot out of a lot of people. And so, there's this whole idea that if we prioritize, we can get them all. But when I've spoken to organizations where they've literally shown me they have 30 priorities, I'm like, this is a joke. Because in a company where there's 30 priorities, what do you get to do? You get to choose which one you like the most and just go with that. And that's where it gets a little more dangerous. So that is the opt-in framework. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I mean, it's so good as usual. Frequency of feedback, is that new?
Yeah. It's part of delegation, really. I mean, I realized it in that example that I told you from a while ago with that boss, where I was like, I didn't. It would have been helpful if I did a really raw deck with just words and then showed it to him, and it would have said, no, that's not what I mean at all. And so, yeah, a lot of this I learned by doing the wrong thing. And that's one of them. Of it's just got to be clear. How much check-in do you want on this? Do you want feedback, the frequency and the level of it?
Mm-hmm. Well, girls, do you have any questions? Comments?
I don't have any questions. It makes complete sense. And I don't think I've ever thought about this, but as you were explaining it in this sense, I'm like, oh yeah, well, yeah, you're right. Because, I didn't, and I might hesitate because of prioritizing, but you're also always a little worried about saying no to people. So, you're like, how is it? How do I come across and be honest and say, like, I can't, no, like, because I have to reprioritize then,
Yeah.
If you're going into this with this mindset, then that makes it so much easier, because then you can have those hard conversations and you don't feel awkward.
Totally. Awesome. So glad you can see that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but yeah, just the way how you described it, the way it's set up, and like maybe the hesitation piece, like going in and asking for more details and negotiating. It's like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And I feel like we don't do that as much as we should, like going into things. And it's, I don't know, like think about that so you can get ahead and, keep things in a timely fashion, keep things going. So yeah, that's what stood out to me the most. It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing where you can print it out, use it for this, and then it starts to become second nature after a while, kind of like tying your shoes. If you've ever seen a little kid do it, they're carefully doing each part of tying their shoes. And that's how it starts with anything of doing this and practicing. And it, like I said, it can work with anything from a job offer to a simple task to a dinner invite.
Yeah, I think about and I originally thought about this because of our clients and how we realized we were getting bottlenecked because they weren't getting things back to us on time, like specifically with revisions. I mean, you've been through that process, so you know how it goes, and it can get to be a lot. and they're busy people. And so realized I started doing like definition, or not definition of done, but like just giving it a date almost, and like confirming it written, which is almost like our layer one. But I also think that standards of success is going to be really important. Like, to what level do we get feedback? Because I don't know if you girls have noticed, but like they'll send it back to us and be like, oh yeah, it's fine. Or like, oh, I didn't like this, but they're not giving us what we need so that we can then provide them with what they want. So it's almost like, what's the standard of success that we're looking for from them in terms of feedback? And also, like, I'm feeling greatly called out right now as a leader. Awesome. High five, Robbie. You rock. Thank you for that. Because I realized, like, with you girls, right, and you're asking me for feedback on things, and we haven't quite defined those 4 things for our work together as well. So I feel like just like the clarity of it all is incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and the clarity can be great with clients. I remember hearing of 37 Signals, who created Basecamp. I think they were talking about situations with client and design times, and they had all this back and forth, and then they switched it to have this agreement that they would have weekly updates, and they were scared that it would be completely rejected, and the client ended up loving it. And I think, like you said, clarity is the most important thing. So if at the beginning of a client engagement, you say, what we found after working with many clients is that the structure to make sure that we all move forward and get you what you want when you need it, et cetera, is to have the structure. We're going to give it to you, and I'm just making stuff up, but in this window, you're going to have a 48-hour, 72-hour, whatever that is, a window for feedback. If it's fine if there's none, if there is none, we'll move forward with that design. And you include that as the agreement, so there's not a surprise, there's not a disappointment, and it also gives you a space of grace. So for example, let's say they missed that, and they're upset, like, oh, I missed that window, can I get this in? And then you can use a phrase like, this was not the agreement, but we'll make an exception in this case. And that's you doing them a favor, as opposed to them feeling entitled that they should be able to give it whenever they want. Now you're much more in a position of power because you're upholding the agreement, but you're being graceful and saying, you know what, I understand things pop up, and this time we'll make an exception to the agreement in this case. And they're like, thank you so much. Right. And then, you can even remind them about the agreement that we're doing this to make sure that we get you what you need when you need it. And we have our own resources that are allocated for this. And if we don't use them in that right time, this pushes other projects and other clients. So we're doing this not only for you, for us, and for every other client. And it's generally, if you take care of this on the front end, it's really easy through the rest of it. But to try to do it after you've been through something, people feel like they're just taken advantage of.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen for sure. And I think also, like, as a team, like, I don't want to, I won't speak for y'all, but I'm definitely like a yes girl. I'm always like, yeah, I can make that happen. Absolutely. Let's go for it. 100%. We got you. And what I'm starting to realize is we're, like, gosh, we're working with like 12 clients right now, I think, between all of us. And so as the more clients come on, the more it's like a huge problem. Like, we can't do that anymore, because then it just messes with everybody's stuff. So
yeah, I've been seeing this. Sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No,
I've been seeing this a lot in the what I would call the boundary space. Whenever I see a business owner get resentful because they feel like a client's being taken advantage of something, it actually upsets me, because I don't think you should ever blame the client. It's an issue of boundaries and clear boundaries. And I found when people are clear on their boundaries, you don't get offended. It's just, if it's a violation, something's not working. But when you're not clear on your boundaries or haven't articulated your boundaries, that's when you get resentful and feel like people owe you and they should be doing this, this, and that, even though you didn't communicate that clearly or use the opt-in framework so that they consciously opt into it. With that agreement, I said they would be consciously opting in. And just like the restaurant, they're more likely to actually give you that feedback on time because they agreed to consciously to do that.
That makes more
yes.
sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, this I'm fascinated by this idea of clear boundaries. This gets into also the Rob method, as we talked about. One of the techniques I do is aligning a group or any kind of company. And I think you could even do this with a family or any kind of group, of saying, like, are you all in on whatever the agreement is of the or a mission or a goal or et cetera? And then if you're not, the ROB is a request. Like Courtney might say, well, if you can get me this tool to use that I would need to do that, then I'll be all in, right? Or an offer. Like if my voice can be heard in this decision, and here, and here, then I'm all in. Or B is boundary. And I saw this save a company once where there was just so much resentment about how much money that was being spent that they said, we are going to set a boundary of this amount going on this project, and that's what we're going to agree to. And then everybody was all in and aligned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because as much as, like, I think we all do a pretty good job of, like, anticipating what each other needs, and like checking in with each other. Like simple example, these two were struggling with tech. And so I was just like, go buy a computer. Like, here's a card, just go buy a computer. Like, I don't care, right? Because they didn't come to me and say, like, they didn't think to say, this would really help me. I could be all in if, like, my tech worked, like you're saying. So we do a good job of anticipating needs, but it's almost like, giving permission to say what you need and what you don't need is, like,
right. Well, also with
well.
that, if I was on your team and you said that, and I come back with the latest Mac server, $6,000 with a 32-inch screen, I'm like, Jasmine, I bought a new computer. Right? The parameters of that agreement weren't quite set there. Was it get a Mac, a PC? Is there a budget range? All that, that's where it's all about the clarity game.
I know. I'd be like, thanks, Jazz. I'm all in.
Ready. And I did set some parameters, but but even like standard for success for that is like, here's what I want you to look and sound like on camera with our clients. Right? Like, so you need this kind of, right? I didn't think about that. Or and the frequency of framework that's new for me today. So I have to noodle on that as well.
Yeah. With this, something to keep in mind too, part of the way that promise theory came up in the programming world was that in computer programming, if you don't have the code in an exact certain way, the computer just rejects it. It doesn't even tell you why. It's just like, nope, this doesn't work. And then you got to fix the code. And so that was what prompted him to say, okay, we need to create the invitations so well that people can accept it as an invitation and say yes or no to it. So that's why it's like there is power in that other side of it, of saying, no, I'm rejecting this because I don't know what success means on this. So I think there's power in that receiving side of it to challenge somebody, because what I found in culture too is it's all about everybody taking responsibility. Jasmine can take responsibility for giving a task, but you can take responsibility for receiving it and saying, hold on, I didn't get this level of clarity I need in order to actually opt into it.
Mm-hmm. I like that we're discussing this and that we're all in agreement about this, because sometimes when you start a new job, you don't have that confidence to speak freely yet, so you get nervous. You're like, oh, I'm just going to take a shot at this. And like you said, you waste hours doing this huge presentation that is completely off base. And you're like, now you're almost too embarrassed to even bring it up. You're like, oh God, all right. Yeah. So like, if you're all on the same page and you know exactly what, what's expected, and and that you have that freedom to come back and say, well, wait a minute, I don't know if that would work, or, explain that more before I can commit. I feel like now you've put our team, like we've been doing great, but now I feel like we're going to be even better.
Mm-hmm.
Like now we know, that we can do this. We can be like, hey, Jazz, we're like, how do I write a script? Like that was like one of my little messages to her this week that she probably couldn't get to. But I was just like, yeah, I don't really know that. But it was like, I felt horrible saying it, but now I can be like, oh, wait a minute, we haven't gone over that yet. So can we go over that? before I dive into it.
Beautiful.
Then it'll be a
Beautiful.
little more efficient, and we'll all, save time, and I won't work on things that were completely off base.
Yeah, part of my work with my mentor Dan on that, it really surprised me because he was talking about how much innovation, especially in the workplace, relies on safety, of people feeling safe. And what he did was he had me do the exercise with the team of who doesn't feel safe on this team, and a surprising number of hands went up on my team, and I thought, oh my God, it shocked me and surprised me. And tools like this are essentially like guardrails, like bumper rails that you can be safe to ping around within there, knowing you won't go off the rails. So these types of models and agreements create the safety.
Yeah, I just love this. So like the more that I'm like looking at the framework, it's just like Josephine said, like the time saving, like all of us on the same page, getting the clients on the same page. We have something to follow and everybody's in agreement. So it's just, I feel like it's going to be more efficient, more productive, and then less wasted time too, instead of like, oh, is that client gonna review those slide decks?
And that doesn't mean that agreements can't be changed as long as there's opt-in on both sides, right? So another pet peeve I have of any kind of vendor is when I ask for something, they say, oh, we can't do that. That's not in the scope of contract, right? Like now I feel bad for having asked, versus the amazing thing would be like, oh, Rob, that's such a great idea. Let me figure out what that scope expansion would look like, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. And great, take my money, right? I'd rather somebody be excited for that renegotiation versus that boundary, like, no, that's not in the scope.
Right. Yeah, flexibility is key. So thank goodness we're all teachers and we're flexible in that aspect.
Yeah, and like renegotiation is important too, because like Robbie, just a little background, like we're at a place where I'm still building out the learning experience designer training for these two. So they're kind of like, they're on the job, like they shadowed me, they're still shadowing me, I'm kind of shadowing them at times, and I have some trainings done, but it's not all the way done. And I'm head of marketing, head of sales, head of delivery, head of, right? So like I am doing so much renegotiation, I feel like all the time, because I'm like, yeah, I can get that to you on Wednesday. And then Wednesday comes and there's a fire. And I'm like, I know I said I'd get that to you by Wednesday, but I have to renegotiate. And like, can I get it to you by Thursday? And it's just like kind of how it is right now, like, so I'm giving myself more time than I think I need, and I still need to renegotiate. So just like the permission that like, that's going to happen because life isn't perfect is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of this comes down to, as I'm sure with this kind of work, it's principles, frameworks, techniques, right? So a principle within that you guys could agree to, and I'm just making stuff up here, but it could be under promise, over deliver, right? And so that can be when you say Wednesday, instead say Friday, and then you got it to them by Thursday and they're psyched, versus when you said Wednesday, now you got to get them by Thursday, right? So a lot of that, passing down the decision making and things like that can be principles that you keep referring back to, and even principles in the design process, right? So like one thing that on that coaching call I went over yesterday was a principle that I like and teach others, which is momentum over velocity. Like I struggle a lot when I don't go the speed I want, but I'm like, no, it's about doing something every day to get there versus the speed I get there. So having principles that you all agree to and can make decisions from will be really helpful.
Yes, I have that children's book.
Children's book?
Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, you said, I thought you said children's book.
Yeah, it's a children's book as well.
Oh, he created a children's version?
Oh, you should go read it. It's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to read that huge one he created.
Yeah, it's like 500. It's this book called Principles by Ray Dalio, who's like a big freaking deal. And the book is like this big.
Yeah.
But then the children's book is like this big. And of course it shows like the pictures that display the concept in a way that you like, because of the pictures, you're like, Oh, I get the concept. Like
It's
it's
so
way
funny, like,
better.
Same thing
Right.
happened with Getting Things Done. The second version
Mhm.
is so freaking thick now, but they came out with Getting Things Done for teens, and it's like really easy to follow. Like you said, graphics and everything.
Yeah, it was way better.
Is it called Principles for Success for All Ages? Is that the one?
I
It
think
doesn't
so.
say.
It's a blue cover.
Yeah. Entertaining illustrated format for readers of all
Yeah.
ages. Okay,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah,
Perfect. Oh, I'm so glad to know about that. Thank you.
yeah. It's pretty cool.
I'll totally get that.
Amazing. Well, do you guys have any other questions for Robbie? Thoughts, comments?
No, thank you so much, Robbie. This was excellent.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, thank you so much. I was thinking right up until the Q&A part is the part that I would use. But let me know if there's anything in there that before that point, if you think is sensitive or don't want me to share. I don't think there was, but I'd love to be able to use the video of that.
Yeah, of course. And would it be okay if I sent it to the people who wanted it?
Go
You
for
cool
it.
with that? Okay,
Yeah, totally.
cool. Amazing.
Yeah,
Well, thank you.
awesome.
Thank
so
you.
much for
I
your
appreciate
time.
you, Robbie.
What was that? I couldn't hear you, Jasmine.
I said I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Have a great day, all you.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. See you later.
Robbie,
Bye, y'all.
meeting you.
Bye.
Bye. That was awesome.